So, hello everyone. Welcome to this webinar for the launch of the book, Creating Empowering Environments for People with Dementia. So after this short introduction, we'll have the pleasure of assisting to 3 plenary sessions on dementia-friendly neighborhoods, hospital and care home design, and one keynote on the future of, and we will finish by a plenary session on the future of architectural design, and we'll have one fundamental keynote with Dr. Maggie Calkins too on the history of design and dementia, and also a case study about the Chris and Sally House. So just to start this introduction, all this adventure started 3.5 years ago when the Interdem board asked me if I'd agree to edit a book on dementia and architectural design, since so many of us were directly or indirectly working on this topic. And at this time, I was just starting to develop the lab I'm working in at the University Hospital of Rennes. And so I originally declined this invitation, not having time to do so. And this is when Professor Martin Orrell, said he knew the right person to help me work on this book, which is now just beside me, Yves Ogervorst. So I said no, and here we all are today. When Yves and I organized the first meeting with Interdem members, we received such a warm welcome and enthusiastic responses that we knew we were on the right track. Experienced researchers on design and dementia like Richard Fleming, Mary Marshall, Maggie Calkins, John Zeisel also immediately responded positively to our solicitations to work on the book and helped us to frame the scope of this book. So Yves and I started working on this, and we could certainly not have managed to edit this book in such an efficient and qualitative way without the help of Sarah Walbrook and Saskia Kuliga, who agreed to join us as junior editors and made our lives so much easier. Sarah and Saskia significantly contributed to make each part of the book more clear and structured. They were able to keep track of every step of the book editing, and also significantly contributed with their knowledge on the topic by writing on transportation, technology, and co-conception. Last and not least, and I'll finish by this, is Bob Woods. His experience and knowledge in dementia care is unequaled. He also gave us the privilege to join us to share his very precious view as a senior editor. And I will now pass the ground to him to share his reflections on the book. Bob, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Oh, excellent. Okay. I've got a couple of slides that I want to share.
I think I've given you presenter rights, so hopefully you should be able to share.
Can you see my screen now?
No, still not.
Not yet.
Can you share? Have you shared? Can you share it? Have you shared it from your screen, Bob?
I thought I was trying to. Yeah, that's. Let's see if I can.
This technical stuff.
So it's the bottom. It's next to leave, the little arrow. If you press it, then you can see the talks.
Yeah, no, I think I'm.
Sorry, yeah,
I'm getting there. So it's just a slow process.
I'm never quite sure where people are at and whether they're as digitally illiterate as myself or.
There we are.
Yes,
okay. Can you see that now?
Excellent.
Yeah,
great.
Great, thank you. Super.
Okay, so thanks, Kevin and Ethan. I just want to give credit to my fellow editors, Ethan and Kevin, for their inspiration in getting this book underway, and Sarah and Saskia for their incredible diligence and attention to detail in making it the book that it is. My role, I guess, was on behalf of Interdem and to bring a long-term view of efforts to develop environments that enhance the quality of life and well-being and function of people living with dementia. Of course, those efforts go back a long way. 50 years ago in the United Kingdom, at least, many people with dementia lived in large mental hospitals, asylums set up in the 19th century. Conditions in these places was far from ideal. They were large institutions, they were situated well away from towns and cities so that the general population didn't have to be reminded of them. They were inaccessible, they were foreboding. The top picture shows one typical Victorian asylum situated handily at the top of a large hill, 20 miles away from the catchment area where people lived. The wards in these hospitals would cater for between 30 to 50 people with dementia. There would be large dormitories, as you see there, and no privacy. People had few, if any, personal possessions. Items of clothing even were shared. And typically there was a rigid routine, and batch nursing was the order of the day. By batch nursing, what I mean is that everybody did everything at the same time. So everybody was taken to the toilet, everybody at the same time, everybody would have their meals at the same time, everybody would get up at the same time. There was no sense of individuality or being person-centered. And so in 1973, I came to work on one of these wards as a fledgling nursing assistant, having just completed my psychology degree. But luckily for me, the ward where I was placed was involved in an innovative project, which was aimed to change the hospital from within. This project empowered staff to examine care practice, to make changes, to, as it says here, to break free from constraints of that rigid routine and batch nursing, and actually to be more person-centered and to spend time interacting with patients and attending to individual needs. I'm very fortunate in that I've actually got a photo there of the first people with dementia that I worked with over 50 years ago. Strangely, I still remember their names, even though I have trouble with remembering the names of people I met yesterday. And it was a wonderful experience. I won't go into great detail about what the project involved, but essentially, we stopped doing everything all at once. We started to be more individualized. We started taking people in a more person-centered way. And the changes were immediately evident to see. And I guess one of the things that I really took away from that was that although we couldn't do much in terms of changing the physical environment, we could change the social environment, and that could have a real impact. As the 1970s went on, I became aware and became involved in some exciting developments in care homes. At that time, as now in the UK, there was these sort of parallel services, the health services and social care services. And what was happening in social care was that, controversially, specialist homes for people with dementia were being established. I say controversially because many people thought this was a really bad thing, because it meant that people with dementia were, in a sense, being separated, they were excluded from other services, they were being put in these specialist homes. But the positive spin on that was that the staff there could actually develop skills and expertise in meeting the needs of residents with dementia. And these pictures from the 1970s show the beginnings of cognitive stimulation therapy in some of the social care settings in which I worked. There were activities, people with dementia were getting engaged and involved. Now, you'd be pleased to know I'm not going to take you through the last 50 years, year by year, but what I wanted to do was just to pick out some of the themes that have been around for quite a while and still seem relevant today. Those of our colleagues present today who've been around for a while might, like me, sometimes think that things go round a bit in circles. And sometimes it seems that it's really hard to actually move on. We just go round and round. But some of these themes, I think, have moved a bit, but it's interesting to see just where they are now. I guess one of the obvious things is the tension between institutions and trying to provide a homely environment. And there have been many examples of how that's moved forward. But of course, there are challenges in doing that in terms of what is homely for one person might not be for another. But also, certainly in the UK, when we tried to establish much smaller sorts of settings for people living with dementia, that's been really challenging in terms of the costs involved. And there seems to be a trend now, from what I can see, in terms of much larger settings, in terms of care homes for people with dementia. And some of the smaller ones have really struggled to be financially viable.
Bob,
Well,
can
then
I
there's-
interrupt you for a
Do
second?
you want the slides to be changed?
All right,
Because your slides are not changing, so we weren't quite sure whether you want.
Okay, well, I've changed my slide. I'm not sure
Oh.
what you can see.
No, we can only see the first slide, as it were.
Okay. Right, I don't know what to do about that. I'm sorry.
Just need to click on the slide you want to go on.
If you go
Yeah,
to the left. Oh.
Yeah, so on my screen, I've got the next slide
Oh.
showing. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, just continue talking. I mean, it's fine.
I see, yeah. We've got it, yeah. We've changed.
We got it.
Yeah,
Yeah, we
we've
got it
changed
now.
it. Yes,
Thank you. Thank you. Super.
Has it changed now? Hello?
Yes.
Yes, it has. Yeah. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. As I said right from the start, I was struck by the interaction between the physical and the social environment. And that interaction, I think, is still very evident today when we think about the eco-psychosocial approach and trying to look at how the physical environment shapes the social environment, but also how the social environment then impacts on the physical environment. I mean, a classic example of that is when the traditional lounges in care homes with their chairs around the walls were sort of broken up into smaller sitting groups. That was a physical change, but then the social change was that the staff then moved them back because it was less convenient for them. So you've got to get these things working in harmony, and that's a real challenge. As I said, that back in the 70s, there was a real debate about whether you should have specialist care for people living with dementia. But I think we're still seeing that debate about whether people with dementia should be included in the mainstream or whether there should be special facilities. And we see that in the dementia villages, for instance, in the Netherlands and in many other examples. I guess the way in which that's moved now is to think more about inclusion as opposed to exclusion, and about people's choices about the sorts of ways in which they live. And then there's an emphasis over the years on upholding human rights. And of course, one of the challenges of a communal setting where a lot of people live together is that one size doesn't fit all, that what's right for one person with dementia might be not right for another person with dementia, or not fit their preferences or their needs. But we still struggle, I think, in terms of person-centered care when we're trying to provide care on a scale. Finally, in terms of the themes that have been around for a long time, I think family involvement becomes really important, is often overlooked. The extent to which the environment actually welcomes and includes the families of people living with dementia and supports their relationships. Okay. But I think that there is some positive change that's evident, and some new themes that are particularly striking in this book. And that's just what I want to conclude by drawing your attention to. I think 50 years ago, we wouldn't have thought about people with dementia in general hospitals and their needs, but now that's seen as very important. A lot of emphasis goes into that. dementia-friendly public buildings and transport. Again, that was just not on the agenda, and that's a really welcome development. One of the things that strikes me, having been involved in a few projects over the years where facilities for people with dementia have been bought at the expense of many millions of pounds, is that the trouble is that we often learn by our mistakes. And those mistakes, when you're talking about the built environment, become very, very costly. So I was very struck in the book by some of the developments about actually being able to experiment using virtual reality, looking at environments before they're built and how that might be really helpful in the future. But then finally, and most importantly, I think the thing that really comes out in the book that is a real change is the involvement of people with dementia in the whole design process, in really shaping the sorts of facilities, the sorts of designs that we have for people with dementia. And I think that's a really positive change and something that we just wouldn't have begun to imagine 50 years ago. And that's one of the things I think that's really exciting. So I'll finish there and hand back to Kevin and Eve. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bob, for all this insightful experience you had with taking care of people with living with dementia. And I think it's very relevant to see how things have moved on since the 70s until now, how all these different approaches have been experimented. And I think it's really something that we need to learn about too. And it's always nice to remind ourselves from where we come from and where we started in all these approaches. So that's a very nice way of sharing your experiences and introducing the next plenary session, which will be on dementia-friendly neighborhoods and living at home, which will be presented, and we'll also have 3 15-minute talks by Emily Ong, which is a dementia advocate, and in Singapore, and has been working in several groups, work groups on design and dementia. There will also be Mary Marshall, which has worked as the director of the DSDC in Scotland a few years ago, and has developed a really significant expertise on different different design features, and that had to be adapted on dementia. And she worked on landscaping, she worked on balconies, she worked on architecture altogether, on toilets, and we've got a lovely chapter, very interesting chapter on toilets in the book, and basically on all the neighborhood and how to make neighborhoods friendly. And finally, we also have John Zeisel from United States, which was also a pioneer of dementia and architecture, and has been working for several years in Hearthstone Alzheimer Care, which were small units, living units for people with dementia, and which had this really particular architectural design, which he thought about altogether and modelized and worked on for more than 30 years. So he was also with Maggie Calkins, Richard Fleming, Mary. He was also one of the pioneers in this field and in this area. And so I've got the pleasure of welcoming them all. Can we see them? John, is your camera on? Emily, can you hear us? And have you got your camera on too? And if yes, Emily.
Yes.
Yeah, hello, Emily.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Okay.
Do you have a presentation to share?
Yes. Would you like
Okay.
do I share from my side or you
Yes,
help
please.
me to? Okay. Let me see. Let me try see I know how to do it now.
My mic is now, can you hear me too?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can hear you too.
Okay.
Okay, do you see my slide?
Yes, wonderful. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Let me put it to Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Kevin, and if for the invitations and the kind introduction. It is an honor to be invited by the editors to speak at the book launch as the chapter co-author of The Voice of People with Dementia at the Core of Environmental Design. That would not have been made possible without my fellow co-authors, Dennis, Martin, Richard, and Habib. In my presentation, I would use the term neurocognitive disorder over dementia, according to the revised DSM-5-TR. It's just a personal choice. When I first heard about dementia-friendly neighborhood, I was intrigued. I wanted to know what a dementia-friendly neighborhood is and how it feels and looks compared to typical neighborhood. I visited the first dementia-friendly public housing estate in Singapore. It's called Yishun. The precinct is demarcated by colors as shown in the photo on the right. I also come across the 6th principle of dementia-friendly neighborhood by Dr. Belinda Yin from the Lee Kuan Yew Center for Innovative City, Singapore University of Technology and Design. The photo on the left is taken from the book and is a newer public housing estate where age-friendly and dementia-friendly principles are incorporated. The 6 guiding principles outlined in the document were based on Burton and colleague work 2004. So the principles are familiarity, legibility, distinctiveness, accessibility, comfort, and safety. So these are the basic principles that I start to get to know when I read the book. There is no doubt that a familiar environment makes getting around easier and less effortful. Clear and visible signages to help us with decision making of which direction to take, memorable landmarks of specific places, easy access to amenities, a comfortable environment with greeneries and sitting areas, and knowing that we can move safely, moving around safely are beneficial to us with a neurocognitive disorder, but not just to us, actually it's to everyone. Even though these guiding principles are good, they can be easily misunderstood as shown in the photo. In my experience working with designers and architects, I have seen poor and unhelpful design. Depending on the context and the perspective, whose perspective are you talking about? A legible environment requirement can be very different to an average person and someone with cognitive impairment like myself. For example, with those arrows there, as shown in the photo, I struggle with diagonal arrows, up and down arrows. I can't make sense of these arrows and leading to wrong interpretations and making me feel stupid and useless even though there is information provided. How often people with neurocognitive disorders have gotten lost finding their way to public toilets in a shopping mall or transportation hubs, or couldn't get in and out of a public toilet. I am one of them. When signage of public toilet is obstructed from the line of sight, small size text, difficult to read font, or hard to understand icon, the design failed to cater for everyone. Unhelpful design causes more confusion to us and frustration for individuals with declining intrinsic capacity to think, to see, to comprehend, and process the information. There is a wonderful chapter on this topic, which Kevin mentioned, Toilets, a Key Feature for Inclusive Design, New Build and Refurbishment by Mary, my fellow co-speaker. You should check it out. Over the last 5 years since I started to get involved in environmental design, I have seen greater awareness of visual perception of the built environment. For example, color, texture, form, and scale are incorporated into the design to influence the experience of people with decreased cognitive function and their interaction with environment. Behind me in this photo is the mural of a traditional Chinese delicacy. We call it Ang Ku Kueh in Hokkien or red tortoise in English, which is used as a block identifier in Kebun Baru public housing estate, which has a high density of older people and those living with neurocognitive disorders. A distinctive and memorable block identifier is needed in public housing estate of Singapore to help to make it easier for older people and those with memory issues to remember their block because every block looks identical. Although this is a Chinese delicacy, we have put careful thought when we select what murals to be used. And these murals, even though it's a Chinese delicacy, is known to the Malays, to the Indians, and Eurasians. That means that it caters to all the 4 major ethnicities in Singapore. However, town planners, designers, and architects must also investigate how other senses can create a profound experience between the user of the space and the environment. An example is the Singapore Jewel Changi Airport. It is one of my favorite places where I do nothing except to rejuvenate with my senses. However, the thundering sound of the 7-story indoor waterfall called Vortex can be a little overwhelming if I stay too long, or worse still when it's crowded with people. I was and still am struggling with visual and auditory sensory overload. Since 2017, when I was diagnosed, I have only gone to watch a movie in a neighborhood cinema, which is very small actually, only twice. And both times I suffer more than I enjoyed the movie. I at least step into big malls nowadays because of too much sensory stimulation. Whenever possible, I will avoid sidewalks along the main road because I am easily overwhelmed by the loud vehicle noise. If there is an underpass or back lane, I will opt for those, even though it is a much longer walk. Therefore, creating a dementia-friendly neighborhood and home needs the involvement of the people living with the condition and their care partners or carers to reduce errors and gaps. As the late Prof. Will a prominent social architect said, towns must be placed in the hands of those who live in them, and it is these people who must be included in the design process. I want an inclusive design that actively considers biological change and decline. When those changes and decline happen, it shouldn't become a barrier to living a meaningful and purposeful life till death. When design respects human values, diversity, and vulnerability, it can uplift the human spirit, dignity, independence, and autonomy. It becomes an empowerment and motivation enabler in a way. Take this mural on the pillar behind me. It's another traditional Chinese delicacy. We call it Tau Teng Kueh in Hokkien or Kueh Lapis in Malay. The block identifier mural is positioned on this pillar in the void deck because of the walking path, making it more noticeable and harder to miss. It is impossible to tell what block it is at the void deck because the giant block number is only on the block packet. This will help those with neurocognitive disorder to know where they are or which block they have passed by, making them feel more assured if they are on their own. Having a sense of control over the environment will help us to reduce the fear of getting lost. However, to age comfortably in one's home requires a living environment that supports and maintains one's functional ability and is flexible, adaptable to meet future needs when the intrinsic capacity further declines or due to age-related issue. A good example is the Chris and Sally house mentioned in the chapter by Manisha and Eve, in which we will later hear from Bill on this house project. But in Singapore, we also have a model flat as shown in the photo in the Nanyang Polytechnic. The model unit demonstrates a supportive, innovative, sustainable design of elderly and dementia-inclusive feature for public housing flats. The Housing Development Board also introduced the Enhancement for Active Senior program in 2012 so that older residents can live safely in their home. It is heavily subsidized home modification because public housing is where most older people and people with neurocognitive disorder are living with their families. Last year, the civil upgrading programs was launched by the HDB to help older people and people with neurocognitive disorder age in place more comfortably and independently by upgrading existing public housing precinct with a high density of older people. On this photo is our members with lived experience from the local environment special interest group, which I started 2 years ago, and with our housing development board. And I'm very happy that we are among the relevant partners that the HDB engages with. So with so many principles and guidelines on dementia inclusive neighborhood, are there areas left unaddressed? Or what else more needs to be done? As a person with lived experience, I believe in bringing neuroarchitecture, sensory design, and human intuitive design onto the discussion table of dementia inclusive design. We need to explore how architectural design can support people with declining cognitive ability to meet their basic needs, optimize the remaining ability to make decisions and help themselves, be mobile and not confined to their place, build and maintain relationships with others beyond their families, and continue to be a contributing member of their families and neighborhood in whatever ways they can. But that is not all. We need to consider gender inclusive architectural design when building dementia inclusive and friendly neighborhood, where sexual and gender minority with neurocognitive disorder can move around easily, free from real and perceived danger in the public and private sphere, participate fully in public life, live healthily, and have a gender-neutral amenities. In conclusion, creating empowering environment for people with neurocognitive disorder takes a community of different disciplines, a combination of design approaches, and a diversity of voices of people with lived experience. It is nothing about me without me and leave no one behind. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a very interesting view of how you supported these and how you participated in all this design process and how you also thought about these different principles of designing for people with dementia. Now, John or Mary, which one of you is going to take the following part?
Mary,
Mary. Oh, Mary, we cannot hear you.
you're muted, my dear.
Yeah. You have to unmute yourself. Wait a minute, we cannot unmute. You have to switch on your microphone, Mary. Up on top on the right. There we
It
could.
says you can no longer.
Good. This is good. This is good now. We can hear you.
You've done it.
Hear me. Will you do my PowerPoints? Because I haven't.
Yes.
Thank you
Just a
very much.
second. So we need to charge them.
I don't know how to do it from here.
Yeah,
I
we
should
will,
ask.
we are going to charge them in a minute.
Okay.
Because
Shall
they're
I
going to come in
carry
and
on?
we're going to share them.
Nice to see you, Mary. I haven't seen you in years. Lovely to see you again.
Okay. You have to share it. Share.
Oh, hang on.
I'm sorry about this. I should have consulted you.
Yeah, that's it.
Not
Right.
at all.
It's
Thank
fine.
you. It's great. Just tell me when you want me to
Yes,
um
I'll do
change
that.
slides.
Okay. I'm very happy to be here. And I should perhaps say at the beginning that this short presentation is based both on 30 years in the field of dementia design, but also on the fact that I'm now 79, have serious arthritis and diminishing vision. So I'm kind of halfway there. And I have 3 friends who are living at home with dementia, and I learn a lot from them. Next slide, please. I'm going to talk entirely about the UK context, where 70% of people with dementia are living at home. Some are owners and some are tenants. 1/3 of old people in the UK live alone, so a large proportion of people with dementia will live alone. One of the challenges in housing design is that the needs of people with dementia change constantly. There is also something to be happy about, which is we have huge progress in awareness of the design of housing with lots of reports, research and guidance, and I've listed some at the end. We also in the UK have a national housing shortage, which means that there's huge political imperative given to building houses, and it's an opportunity for all of us to try and influence the design of these houses to make sure that they accommodate the needs of people with dementia. Next slide, please. The limitations of this short talk are very obvious, but one is that I can only touch on a few issues, and I can only talk about the UK, and I'm not going to mention technology, which is one of the most important emerging aspects of design and dementia. More seriously, I'm not going to say anything about culturally appropriate design, which is really crucial. Whether your background is urban, rural, remote rural, where you lived for your childhood and young adulthood. It seems we get our most acute awareness of design between adolescence and early adulthood. This house is what we call a croft house, a tiny farmhouse in a remote rural area of northwest Scotland. The man who lived in this house, he's always lived there, had a bathroom put in the 1960s. He has never seen or been in a shower and would panic and be wholly unable to use a shower if it was installed. We have to be sensitive to people's cultural background. So start by talking a bit about living at home. To remain at home often requires continual adaptations. That's an obvious truism, but it's not at all straightforward to implement. It's easier in some houses than others. The house on the left is a farm cottage in Shetland, and that has been converted for a wide range of disabilities, including dementia and autism. It's a huge amount more problematic with tenements, which is what we call flats in Scotland. Most of us, including me, live in not quite like this. These are very old flats from the medieval times, but we live in blocks of flats, and those are really often very difficult to adapt suitably. Next one, please. So some words about adaptations, which I think is perhaps the crucial issue in housing design. They're so problematic. They require constant review, and the answer is by whom and when. They cost money, and who pays. Here the local authority might pay for one major adaptations, but would struggle to pay for continual adaptations as needs change. There's a woeful lack of knowledge really of all parties. And I remember being consulted by a lady who was telling me it was so sad because her husband could no longer, as he had all their married life, prepare the breakfast and put it on the table. And I suggested she took her cupboard doors away and put glass fronted cupboards. And I had a phone call a few weeks later saying he was now again able to prepare the breakfast and put it on the table. But the lack of understanding, linking behavior to design is really very considerable. And of course, the organization, who organizes adaptations? A lot of parties involved in doing an adaptation. Another complication is that the needs of older people are often a combination of physical and relating to dementia, and in some ways they can conflict, and a big one is lever taps. Lever taps are often very useful to people with very arthritic hands and very confusing to people with dementia who have never seen them before, or if they have, they can't remember. Some adaptations are quite straightforward, improving the lighting, minimizing contrast in the flooring, putting in glass-fronted cupboards, but others are much more complex, and it will not surprise you to know that I'm going to be talking about bathrooms, because that is a very complex adaptation. Next one, please. Have we got stuck? Sorry, shall I go on talking or can it change?
Sorry, just I think I'll
It's headed, why focus on bathrooms?
I'm going to suggest, Mary, that you continue the presentation and the slides will catch up because the words are more important than the visual.
I'm not sure about that, but still. The next slide is why focus on bathrooms. And the bathroom, in my view, is the most challenging to get right, and it's rarely given enough attention. There is this international squeamishness about talking about bathrooms and toilets. There's a lovely book by Nick Haslam looking at why this should be the case, but there's a resistance to seriously addressing the issue. But if people with dementia have difficulties in the bathroom, it profoundly affects their dignity, confidence, and self-esteem. And I know that I can't use many bathrooms in people's houses, and I can become very upset. Of course, it also has an impact on safety and on hygiene, but it has major emotional consequences. Bathrooms are often not fully enabling for people with dementia. Complex shower controls, insufficient contrast between the white sanitary ware and the wall, and I personally find that very difficult at the moment. I can work it out. Someone with dementia would just be wholly baffled by it. Tricky flush systems, that's an increasing issue in modern sanitary ware, is the button is around the side, and that can never be understood by someone with dementia. We need to ensure that all, and I mean all parties involved in design, have an understanding and empathy for people with dementia. The regulators, I was involved in a little dispute recently between the regulator who said it must be a lever tap and the architect who said, but I don't think that's going to help. I'm not sure who won that one, but it's a serious issue. Suppliers, if you look at the suppliers' websites, this slide is near the end. So we've jumped right to the end. Oh, well, I shall just carry on.
Which one should I go
I want
on?
something called bathrooms with a picture of a shower control. It's quite a...
Yeah.
This one?
Yeah, oh, brilliant, that's it.
Okay.
I'm talking about all the people who should be involved. I was involved with a plumber, and I specified a high toilet, and he said he couldn't get one and put in the wrong one. So the person will have difficulties for as long as they live there. Next one, please. Taps seem particularly problematic. The one on the left is in housing for older people and people with dementia. I don't know what you think about it. You can't tell which is hot and cold. But I personally never saw a mixer tap until I was in my 30s. So maybe when I get dementia, I won't know what that is. The one on the right is in housing specially designed for people with dementia, and I think is truly baffling. The little lever works the plug. And surprisingly, those levers go backwards, not forwards. Many people with dementia would struggle and probably fail to wash their hands with that version of a tap. Next, please. I'm going quite quickly. New housing for older people, there's a huge variation in my experience in the extent to which they're designed for dementia. People are now increasingly good at designing for physical disabilities, but don't understand the need to think about people with dementia. Most UK housing associations, which is housing that's provided by not-for-profit organisations, seem to be aware of the need to consider both old age and dementia. And some of them are quite, sorry, I'll finish the last one, are quite exceptionally good at it. For example, Housing 21 and Anchor Housing, if you want to look at some wonderful examples. Next, please. Now, this is really important at a time when we're building a lot of new housing in the UK. Ideally, new housing should be designed to enable people to remain there for their lifetime. And I was invited to meet a team of people who were designing 3,000 lifetime homes for sale. And I gave my talk about dementia design, and the marketing woman said, well, it's all very well, but we couldn't sell them with the sorts of things that you're suggesting. It just wouldn't be marketable, she said. She could deal with high levels of visual access, but other things she couldn't cope with at all. And the notion of putting in old-fashioned taps like these, which are totally easy to understand and have hot and cold at the top of them, was appalling to her. The place would look old-fashioned, and there was no way she could sell the houses. Next one, please. So, concluding points. There are these days a wonderful collection of guidelines and some really outstanding examples to look at. And somehow we have to energetically promote both of these if we're going to have an impact on what we hope is a housing boom. But there's a long way to go to make sure that everyone in the housing world, not just the architects and the commissioners, but the people who are building it, who are providing the equipment, and people like that have knowledge and empathy. Sometimes people have a sort of routine, static knowledge of principles, but not an empathy about how someone would cope with it. And in my view, bathrooms are a good test of the extent to which housing is fully enabling for people with dementia, because invariably it hasn't been given enough attention. The brief is not detailed enough, and the delivery can be a bit hasty and unreliable. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So sorry about that, Mary. And
Not at all. I should have discussed it before.
No, thank you very much. That was a wonderful talk. Thank you.
John is the next one talking.
This is true.
That's good.
So how do I get on the screen?
We've made you a presenter, John.
So you just need to share your PowerPoint.
And now I'm just looking at where I share, and then I'll be ready
Yes,
in just a moment.
Top right, just next to leave, that's it. There's you. There you are. We can see you.
Okay, so now I've got to find what I'm sharing.
Next, yeah. You will find that in the bottom on the right hand side.
So do you see this?
That's it.
Yes,
lovely.
Great, wonderful, thank you.
And you can start your presentation. That's it. Lovely, John.
This presentation and this whole morning for me, afternoon for some, probably night for others, is to celebrate book that you all put together called Creating Empowering Environments for People with Dementia. And I would like to make clear that this is why I got up at 3 in the morning and why we're here, because every effort you make to share this knowledge with others moves forward a very important movement that's been going on for many years. And I'm involved with various people doing things. And what I always say, well, we all know the answers now about bathrooms or about cities or about hospitals. And they say, well, we may know the answers, but we're a very small group of people. We really have to change the ecosystem of politics and policies and medical education and architectural education to incorporate the kind of knowledge that you're putting in to the book. The chapter that I wrote with my colleague Richard Fleming is called Translating Environmental Design Knowledge into Practice. And as some of you know, it's based on the professional experience of Richard and myself. Richard's in Australia, I'm in the US, so it's on the opposite side of the world. I just returned from Australia, and the difference between between 40 degrees centigrade and minus 30 degrees centigrade is quite shocking on the body. We discussed the 4 stages of moving new knowledge into practice. The first, based on the work of Pathman, and it begins with raising awareness that there is new knowledge. Your book does that as well as building on it. Creating agreement to participate in the needed change in practice. That's a very important element that's needed. To adopt the new knowledge in practice, to actually apply it. And Emily's words were quite moving, and Bob Woods, who I have worked with before, was also, as well as Mary, talking about the importance of putting this stuff into practice. And then finally, the last A, adherence, is that the new knowledge and practice have to become part of a larger system, business as usual, including guidelines, regulations, and policy. This presentation is under the title of Dementia-Friendly Neighborhoods and Living at Home. And I'm going to address one question. What is home? The first thing we have to do in order to answer this question is to stop. Stop thinking we know the answers. Stop building on past work. Stop stigmatizing others who live with dementia or don't. Stop worrying about every little piece when the whole is not coming together. And we have to stop thinking that we have the answers. This book is a wonderful compilation of many, many answers and many ways of thinking. Let's use it to move forward, not to stop in our tracks. The goal of home, of neighborhood, of all of the title of this book is something that Socrates talked about, that others in this field have talked about, namely eudaimonia, which is the Greek phrase for flourishing, for human flourishing. And that's what underlies the presentation I'm making this morning. The world looks at children and says, of course they flourish, and teenagers, we hope they grow out of whatever situation they're in and flourish. Adults, they can balance life and work and all these kind of things, can flourish. Old people, well, they're sort of past it, but perhaps they can flourish. But when it comes to old people living with dementia, the world out there is saying, come on, what are you talking about? Flourishing is not something that you can do with dementia. And that is really the goal, in my mind, of all the work we are doing, which is to understand the role of eudaimonia, of flourishing among that group of people that we're talking about. Now, that group of people is not a small group of people. The online available data, and it's not very good, demonstrates that over the age of 75, 45% of everyone is living with some cognitive challenge. The work we are doing is not about them with dementia, they with dementia, people living with dementia. It's half the people younger than I am. Half the people nearly of all of us as we age, Mary and me and others that we're talking about. So this is not a small issue that we are talking about. This is a major issue for almost everybody as societies get older, as we get older. The data show there is no aging without cognitive challenges. So the cognitive challenges is what we're dealing with, and it's everybody we know. Underlying my work and the work that I'd like to talk about is hope. It's not that it's hopeless. Even Mary in her presentation had some success, despite the fact that others say, oh, I can't sell those old-fashioned bathroom fixtures. Hope lies in knowing that we, thanks to your book, thanks to people like Bob and Mary and Emily and you, Kevin, who I work with, knowing that we can make a difference. We can make a difference in the lives of people living with dementia in all our lives. But we have to decide first which is the public narrative around dementia that we are going to embrace. Is it the despair narrative that says the minute you get a diagnosis, it's a downward slope, it's loss, it's misery, it's going no place? Or is it hope that we can have a life of well-being that flourishes? So the hope model that I propose is, and have been proposing for some time, is that we embrace the present. We don't say it's great to have dementia, but as we get older, we see who we are, we do things together, we appreciate our abilities, we become more confident, we are more in control, which is a major part of home, and we have better relationships. So hope is underlying all the design stuff we're doing. Hope lies in our brains. The neuroscience of architecture, the neuroscience in design, which is what I'm going to focus on in the next few minutes, is based on the fact that our brains begin life with 100 billion neurons. Over time, they get modified, and certain neurons get stronger and others get less. But that's the same number of all the stars in our galaxy and the number of galaxies we know that are out there. Our brains, as we age, do not just stop. The 45% of people over 75, our brains are naturally curious and creative. Our brains are made to explore and discover. If you listen to, as we did to Emily's presentation, she is exploring and trying to discover and being creative about how she sees the environment. And she talked about the sensory design. She talked about neuroarchitecture, sensory design, and human intuitive design. Our brains are the organ in our bodies that translates the eco-psychosocial environment. Thank you, Bob, for mentioning it and using that term, a term that Bob and I and Barry Riesberg and others wrote about and tried to push forward. Some people still say some people still say psychosocial and environmental, but I urge those people on the screen who do that to use the word eco-psychosocial as Bob did. And our brains take that eco-psychosocial environment and use our senses to turn them into feelings, emotions, and behavior. That's where home lies. Home lies in feelings, emotions, and behavior, not in some design criterion. And most importantly, for the belief in home as a central part of people's lives, is that we are born, and we never lose, hardwired, preset, universal skills. We're born with the ability and the understanding of what smiles and facial expressions are. We're born with a feeling for music. We're born with understanding the touch when we are put on our parents' chest or breasts when the moment we're born. Feeling safe at home is hardwired in our brains. We're born with an understanding of safety in home. Little children, when they're taken out of their crib after a month or so, they start to cry just because they're leaving home. This understanding and attachment to home is vital, and we have to, in our work in environment behavior and in neuroarchitecture, we need to continually start to focus on the importance of home. Home environments, to use a three-part salutogenic set of principles, are comprehensible. Homes are understandable. People can see what they are. They know when they're there. They're manageable. They can be dealt with. They have toilets and bathrooms that can be used correctly. They have kitchens that are safe. They have spaces that are safe. And they are meaningful. Home is a place that means something to others. Home is a place which is a place that I want to get up in the morning to be there. Ikigai is a Japanese term for having a reason to get up in the morning. So home, just defining it, it's understandable, it's manageable, and it means something to those at home. Home does something else. Home environments give you a sense of the whole. It gives you a sense of the day. It gives you a sense of the morning. It gives you a sense of where you are in the world, which is one of the major, in my new work that I'm doing, is one of the major concerns and one of the major difficulties that we all have, but that the scaffolding that connects and makes things continuous and coherent diminishes over time as we get older and as we get older with cognitive issues. So home is not only manageable and understandable and meaningful, it is connected. It is a whole in itself. It's a continuous place. It's not one room here and another room there, and we don't get lost in it. It's coherent. It provides a way for people, all of us, to understand where we are. When we move into a new home, we connect it, we make it continuous, we make it coherent. Bob mentioned the villages, the dementia villages that are now coming out in the world. There are 20, 30 out there. And I'm working very closely with the village in southern France, in Dax, called the Village de l'Ondé. It is home to all who live, work, partner, and visit there. So home is not just a small little place. It's a place with all those characteristics that can be an entire village or can be a little place that you live in the village. So home is a profound concept that we have to start to understand. I've been working with an exhibition at the Cooper Hewitt Museum in New York City, where they have an exhibition called Revisiting Home. And in that, there's a conversation with an architect, Sushi Riddy, and myself on making home. And it's been there, and there'll be a publication around it. So the following comments that I'm going to make are drawn from that chapter. Home is a feeling. It is not a place. I feel at home in nature. I feel at home when I'm cooking. I feel at home when I'm with my kids. I feel at home when I'm all by myself listening to music. Being at home is wherever you feel at home, defined by the way you feel there, including the culture you're in. So when we have all this immigration and the world is changing and moving, we have to understand that people are not at home and the impact it has on their lives and on their minds. We embody home. It is not something outside of ourselves. So home embodied in this way is part of us. It's not a place that we go and we sit in. It's us. And that embodied part of us is part of an ongoing dialogue between us and the environments we adopt as home. And so the designer's goal is to create adoptable environments that can be made to feel at home and made to feel at home quickly. We carry home with us. It is not some place that we leave and go back to. Wherever we move, we carry home with us. If you move from one city to the other, if you move from one place to the other, from one country to the other, we are continually creating experiences around our concept of home, all of us, all the time. It's not for naught that people's workspaces are created in a way that reflects their home. If you look at the background in Mary when she was speaking, that's home. Home environments are in a neurodialogue with their users. Home is a mental construct and a physical construct. It is not a box in which we do things. We continually interact with our home environment. It's a thing with which we do things. So the nature of home is interactive rather than a place we go into. There are a few critical design principles to create home for persons living with dementia. There are many others, but the first is to create spaces of their own with the things around us that say, this is me and I feel comfortable. We have to invite direct contact with nature. It's not just looking out a window, it's being in nature. And we have to provide clear destinations where people walk and move so that they end up someplace, not no place, even if you didn't start with an exact idea of where you were going. There are many principles that can feed this embodied sense of home. And finally, I'd like to say critical to feeling at home are equity, empathy, and agency. What all of us require to be at home is being in control of our lives and our world in every environment we inhabit. It's critical that we as environment behavior experts provide this knowledge of what it means to create a home in every environment, not just in a little place that we happen to sleep. The principle is to use design know-how to create environments that provide agency, that provide people with the control over their lives and meaningful decisions, avoiding disempowering environments and starting the dialogue. The goal in my work is that environments at home not only provide safety, health, and function, but also a sense of ourselves, of our own story. And that, to me, is where the design of home and the design of being at home and feeling at home has to go. To quote my colleague and wonderful thinker in this field, home provides connectedness, identity, autonomy, security, growth, meaning, and joy. And as environmental consultants, behaviorists, eco-psychosocial designers, the more we can get to this goal, the better we'll be. All we have to do is start to move forward in this movement. And your book, Creating Empowering Environments for People with Dementia, is a wonderful and important first step, or second step, or third step in this movement forward. Thank you.
That was great. Thank you. Wonderful. Really great talk. Thank you so much, John.
Thank you for the invitation.
So for the next bit, Saskia will moderate this as one of our junior editors. And what we'll do is we'll try to do something that's a little bit experimental for us, which is called Vivox. Now I'll try to get that up on the screen.
To share.
To share it, sorry, with you. Yep.
Go back on the.
I know. There's some things I do know, and that was one of them. Okay, so here we go. And then
Vivox PowerPoint.
Vivox PowerPoint. Here we go. So can you see the slide?
Yes.
Great. Now, if you take your mobile phone, if you have one, and you go to the pictures, so you just go to where you have the camera, sorry, not the pictures, the camera, and you point the camera onto that squiggly box.
The QR code.
The QR code, otherwise known as, for those who didn't know. you can see something called coming up, and that's called VFox app. And
I got that.
if you click on that, you will go into the poll. Okay.
I'm in it.
Cool. That's fantastic. Everybody in it? Are you going to try to do that? Because we will try to do an interactive approach here with VFox. And for that, I have to go. This is really
So sorry, Mary, your technological inabilities are now going, it's going over our head.
yeah, it's going over my head as well. So I'm going to try to start this poll, and Saskia will read out the question. I think, Saskia, do you want to take over from here?
So are we typing the response in?
Yeah, you'll
Yes.
type the response in. Yeah.
Yes. So we're working interactively to get into a discussion with you now. And by the way, if you have questions during the speakers presenting, you can always also use the Teams chat. But this one that Eve has just raised will, I think, be anonymous. So you can really type in whatever you like. And there is a first question we would really like you to think about, which is, what do you think are perhaps future topics that to focus on co-design and living at home or in the neighborhood? And then you can type in your response, and after a while we will see the answers, I guess.
Yeah, we'll keep that open for a bit if you want to put your comments in.
And you can also type in several things or use it multiple times.
So I have a question for, while everybody's answering this, I have a question for all of you, Mary, Emily, and John. I think your presentations were really, really interesting and just showed us how much experiential is important, experiential design is important, past experience is also important, and everything about adapting to our environment. It's a bit like having a homeostatic approach of environment and design. How to find this balance between well-being and eventually the dementia course we can go through, and it's all about adapting and intelligence and human intelligence. And then my question is, for designing for future design, should we maybe leave more space to let people cope with the environment, as we could see in a sort of transactional way, and it's a bit what we hear about inclusive approaches, meaning that we want people to express their competencies through the resources and the opportunities that we provide for them in the environment. What do you think all this comes into for the environment? Should we just provide specific environments for people with dementia, or finally should we provide, because that's what you were saying, John, about feeling at home is just a feeling. It's not no features that make you feel at home. You make yourself feel at home. So shall we finally should we provide generic environments for these people, or do you think it's really specific to people living with dementia? This is a question for Emily, Mary, and John.
I'll answer only after Mary, after Emily says something.
Shall I start?
You start,
Yes.
Mary.
I think it varies from person to person. Some people want desperately to stay in their own houses. Some people can't. Some people want to live in communities with other people with dementia. Some people really don't want that at all. And I would hate us to think there was one solution to this. What we need to do is provide a wide range of options, all designed to give people with dementia opportunities for choice, but also for safety.
Emily?
Okay. Yeah, for me is I echo what Mary said, that giving us the opportunity and to make choices of what type of homes that we want to be. But like what John said, home is just it's not actually the physical space. It is more like how this space makes me feel. Do I feel psychologically safe? It can be physically safe, but if I don't feel psychologically safe enough to explore, I will still not see that as a home. So for me, is that especially for people living with a very early stage now with all the awareness and earlier diagnosis, there are more people who are still at very high functioning for like myself. So then we need an environment that we can still continue to function in just like everybody. And the as our need progresses, there should be an opportunity for us to say, hey, okay, I need this now, and where can I get all this? Are there fundings to help us to make that possible or not? Like what the Singapore government is doing to provide these the elder senior programs to make the basic renovations possible. And yeah, so it is there is no one solution for this, but it still come back to the question of you need to hear from the people living with dementia and their family members.
So just to give you a quick a quick response. You asked the question, Kevin, and Mary used terms like for these people. Provide for them. And Emily used the term just like everybody. I showed some slides of Dax, the village in southern France. And one of the interesting things is that nobody talks about them and them as different from us. The 350 people who live, work, visit, like myself and family members who are there, they're us. They're all of us. And to start, first thing we have to do is understand that we all need choice when it comes to environments. We all need agency. We all need the ability to create our own home. We all need to feel at home. And to distinguish us from them is a huge, I think, mistake. We have to start designing environments and pushing forward environments that support all of us. That will support people living with dementia, because we all need the same supports for our being and feeling at home and feeling in the neighborhood and being able to negotiate our cities. So the first step is to change the paradigm of we and them, that there are two realities, and understand that there's just one reality out there. We have to create it so that it works for all of us.
Okay. Well, thank you for answering. I think you're quite right, and it just shows how much basically this how I say, it's maybe just a generic environment. It's not that much of a specific environment, as you said, John. It's not about them. It's about all of us. It's about how we live this environment, how we perceive it, and how we how we experience it all together. That leads me to for me, when I hear all this, that really leads me to better understand what we think about and what we understand when we're talking about transactions in an environment. It's just a continuous negotiation between the person and its environment, and I think this is quite interesting to understand how this can come out with all your examples, and how transactions actually take life with your different examples. I think this is good. If that's it, and you can share this, and this is, I think, we can all see this. There we are. So
Saskia, do you want to go through some of the words that came up?
So one of the keywords here is implementation, which many people apparently said, and it's therefore very large. But also there are several other things such as personalization, choice, co-creation, healthcare at home, co-design. So these also go together with co-research. There are some words on the sensory level, such as sound or noise, and I think that fits very well to Emily's talk as well. Inclusive community. So there are a lot of things and to talk about, a lot of future topics. There was also one question in the other chat, which I think has partially been answered already, but somebody wondered whether there's an opportunity to design a dementia-friendly environment for younger people, because people with young onset dementia may have very different needs.
Yeah, I think that comes up in here as well, doesn't it? Here for people with young onset dementia. This is really wonderful. Thank you. I mean, this is my apologies for the clunkiness of it, but we've managed to do this. So we'll try to do that again for the next sessions. We realized we didn't really have a loo break or coffee break or what have you. So we'll just, if it's okay with all of you, take 5 minutes out. So we'll start at about what you say.
5 minutes?
5 minutes, yeah, at about 35 past 12. So that gives us a bit of a chance of quick loo break, quick drink, and then we'll
prepare for Maggie's presentation
see.
on the history of architecture.
Yeah, thank you. So
we'll see you just in 5 little minutes, so that we can just prepare the following presentation with Maggie.
Thank you. See you in a bit.
Bye.
Hello and welcome back. We will now start with Maggie Calkins, and she's kindly discussed with us to give this keynote on learning from the past and applying it to the future. I will. Maggie's already put her slide up, and so without any further introduction, I think everybody knows Maggie. We will continue.
Yeah.
With the talk.
The floor is yours, Maggie. So we can't hear you. You have to.
All right, is that working now?
Yeah, that's good.
Thank you.
Okay. Great. Well, I am delighted to be here and, you know, amongst all of my fellow pioneers in this field. It's just great to have us all in one space, you know, Mary and John and Richard Fleming and Bob and, you know, Kevin and Eve. I think this is a wonderful experience. And I agree with the a lot of the comments that have already been expressed. And particularly, I'm going to build a little on John's last comments about, you know, us versus them and changing the whole paradigm. And we need to look at the past to understand it so that it can inform the future, if it's a future that we want to be purposeful in thinking about and in planning. And so I put up this quote, which many people attribute to Winston Churchill, but it was not his quote. It was George Santayana. And as we look at the history of designing for people living with dementia, Bob talked about, you know, the almshouses and the mental institutions, and they are, in fact, places where people who had neurocognitive disorders lived, but they weren't designed for them. So intentional design, or intentional design that was meant to be positive and therapeutic, really started in the 70s. In the US, it started with the work primarily of Powell Lawton, and then others took it up. And at that time, we thought about people who were living with dementia as having unique needs. And it's why we talked about special care units or dementia care units. And we said that they were different. And it's because in the context of designing nursing homes, and of course that's now expanded to other residential types of settings, they weren't what we called the sort of the typical nursing home patient who was there for medical reasons. These were individuals who often were physically fairly healthy, but had cognitive challenges. And so there was a focus on all of these cognitive challenges and the disabilities that they were associated with. So how do we manage agitation or aggression, incontinence, wandering, safety? All of that kind of language was pervasive in the literature. By the mid-90s, we started to shift the focus to more positive principles. We said, you know, yes, they may be different, but there are things that we can do, and we should be focusing on positive things. And I use the PEAP, the Professional Environmental Assessment Protocol, just as an example. John had a set of principles. Paul Windley had some, I had some, Yuri Cohen and Jerry Weissman had positive principles, and they're all, there's a lot of similarity between a lot of them. They've used slightly different language. And in Australia, Richard Fleming was doing this, and Mary was doing this in the UK and in Scotland. So it wasn't an individual emphasis. But so I'm going to use as an example, initially when we talked about the walking patterns of individuals. And so I put managing wandering in quotes because it's not language that we currently think of as an appropriate description. But what we used to do is just take an existing unit and lock the door to make it secure so that they couldn't wander away. It didn't address the actual behavior, the engagement in walking that people do. And they often ended up with these sort of dead-end corridors, which some people have a hard time figuring out what to do when they get to the end of the corridor. If they can't keep going straight, they don't really understand what their options are. So the first kind of response to that was to design a wandering loop. And this is a building that I worked on in the 80s. And we created this looping path so that people could walk around the dining room and the kitchen areas. And but the whole purpose of that was just to allow them to sort of keep going around in a circle. And it didn't think about what do they really see along that path. The main living room up at the top, or the other sort of activity rooms, or even the doors to the outside, were not really considered as part of that path. And so we made it maybe somewhat less frustrating, but didn't really take it to the next step. Whereas what we're looking at now is there is in this building a path that people can follow, but it takes them past all of these positive destinations, so that you, as you come in the front door, you sort of come right past the living room, and then there's another set of activity spaces, or you can see into the dining room and the kitchen, or the sunroom, and you could go out to the porch. And so it invites people not to just engage in walking, but to be look at activities that people might then want to participate in. And so it changes the whole mindset. Somebody walking around this building isn't necessarily going to be seen as wandering. Another example is how we manage stimulation. And all of you are probably familiar with the Lawton and Nahimo competence press model, which said that there is a level of environmental press, one form of which is stimulation. There are many other forms, and that too much or too little is not supportive of the needs of individuals. And then Hall and Buckwalter took that and said, but for people with dementia, it's really, there's a stress threshold, and their exposure to any kind of environment or setting over time builds their stress. And if they cross that threshold, they will engage in negative responses because they can't manage it all, which led to the creation of low stimulus environments. The thought was the less stimulation in the environment, the easier it is for people to be able to manage, and they won't cross that stress threshold. The nice thing about the Lawton and Nahimo model is that it said these kinds of environments are equally debilitating, and that what we really want is coherent stimulation, an environment that people can read and can make sense of. So when you come in the front door, again, there's a living room right there, and you can see the dining room is adjacent to this. And on the right, if you come out of your bedroom, that you can see what's there, and they are designs that make sense to people who, as a place where you would live, as opposed to, you know, if you're coming out of a doctor's office, you expect to see corridors and a more institutional building. And so that design isn't going to be supportive of individuals living with dementia, but it's also not supportive for the rest of us. I don't think anyone, even someone who is not experiencing significant cognitive deterioration, wants to live in an environment that feels like it's an institution, that feels like, you know, it should be a doctor's office, for example. And so the shifting thought process of they're more like us being normal people with normal cognition, is that no, in fact, we're all the same. They are not any different. They are us. They are maybe our future. And that we want to think about, how do I design for me? How do I design for what I want? because those same principles, maybe not the exact design response, but those same principles likely apply to lots of other people. And so we started moving from institutional design to residential. And the problem at the beginning was we said, we don't want institutions, so we should design non-institutional settings. And the problem is you can't design to non-institutional. You can't design a not of something. You have to have a goal of what you want. And so, very different front door entrances to the place where people might live, a nursing home. And again, we see it inside as well. I'm using this as a front door example. This was a building that was designed in the late 1990s, small household spaces. And these are the front doors to 2 of the 4 houses. Well, they have a different color, but that doesn't look really like the front door to a house that I am generally familiar with. This project, Penny Burnett Marysfield, is a renovation. It was a very traditional institutional building, long corridors, double loaded corridors, front doors to the units that were, fire doors and nothing else. And when they redesigned it to create households, they said every household should have its own front door, its front entrance. There's a whole sequence. Most buildings have some transition between the street, the public, the sidewalk, the front yard, a front porch, and then you get to the front door. And so by reflecting those same design parameters within these residential settings, we're creating places that people are familiar with. Residential is hard. It's sort of, it when you see it, but it's hard to define. What are the components? And I'm just going to talk about a couple of them. Size is certainly one, but what's the right size? 6 is certainly a residential feeling. A lot of people grew up in families with 6 or 9. Some people had 12, but that's getting to be a really big family. But if you have 12 people living together, can that still feel residential? I think we can all agree that 24 and above is not going to feel residential. People don't live in a household, a home space generally with 24 people. But where is that line? And in certain cultures, you wouldn't think of going above 6 or 7 people living together. Here in the US, we still create some of those bigger settings and put them in hospitality instead of residential, which is really a different category. But, is 12 the top? Is 15, 18? There's still a lot of debate going on as to how many people you can put together. And it comes down to some of the financial implications of, can we make this kind of housing with support systems supportive and cost effective? Are there places to engage in meaningful activity? Again, we've had this conversation before. What's meaningful to one person might not be meaningful to another, but there are things that we can do to create opportunities. And then autonomy and control. That's really the ability to make decisions about your daily life, how you're going to live it, when you're going to wake up, when you're going to have meals, things like that. So size impacts scale. This is a building for 16 people, which, in our US standards would still be considered fairly small scale residential. But you look at that dining room, and I don't have a dining room that looks like that in my house. And I don't know very many houses that have a dining room that looks like that. So even at 16, it's losing that sense of, this feels very familiar to what I'm used to. And it's not just the size, it's also how you articulate the space. So the image on the top right is from a project in the early 1990s. And the one on the bottom is a relatively new building. I think it was 7 or 8 years ago that it was built. And in both of them, the scale of the space, the height of the ceilings make it feel not typically residential, whereas the image on the left, and all three of these settings accommodate 12 individuals in a household. The one on the left has a scale, a sense that it could feel like this is a place where I would have lived. And so we need to think about those aspects of design and how they communicate whether this is going to feel like home, or I like to use the term feeling at home. I feel at home in a couple of my friends' houses. I have refrigerator rights, but I feel less at home in some of my other friends' houses. Moving on to, how do we design for meaningful activities? These are early examples of what not to do. You line up chairs, you have them face a wall. This one on the right is in a day program, and this wall that the chair is leaning back against was actually put up just so that they would have a wandering loop. And yet they put the chair and face it to a blank wall. They didn't even move it down and put it in front of the window so that somebody who wanted to stop and sit and rest, which is reasonable accommodation for someone who might spend a lot of time walking, could look out the window. There's a nice horse farm right across the street. In more current thinking, we're designing places that give you opportunities to engage. And so you can walk right past this art studio on the left. Creekview, of the two images on the right, is in Wisconsin. They have long winters. So they took a children's play area and brought it inside so that families could be together and the kids could run around and play in this area and still be meaningfully engaged. And the space on the top is not inside of a household, but between households. So it's a different kind of a destination. You can barely see at the sort of the far left side of that image is a door that goes into a meeting room. That is a meeting room for residents. That is not a room that is used by staff for staff meetings. The residents in this building, in this community, sit on and create a lot of committees, and that's where a lot of those committees meet. There's a set of tables for doing table-based activities. There's the fireplace. So we think differently, both inside and outside, about what is it that people want to do, and creating opportunities to naturally engage in things that are familiar and bring joy and bring meaning to life. Just being able to rake the leaves for people who, have lived at home and had to rake their leaves every year, still being able to do that brought this gentleman in the orange jacket a lot of joy. We wanted design to support personalization. Some of the images that Bob showed where they're, you don't even get your own clothes, you have to share your clothes, and you had no personal possessions. We can allow someone to put up a couple of pictures in their room, but that doesn't really support and encourage people to personalize their rooms. Whereas these two images show the ways in which design really encourage people to personalize their space, to bring their past with them as they move. When you move into a new house, you don't tend to leave all of your personal possessions alone back at the old house. You bring them with you, and they're a part of who you are. They're a part of your identity. They talk about whether you are an artist or you are a traveler or you are a musician. And we need to think about doing that not just in bedrooms, but in the shared spaces of where these households. And so these are images from lots of different places, and they reflect the lives and the interests of people who have lived there. And so you don't just, it's not just your bedroom that is your space. You are a part of a household that, and it's that community space that is also reflective of you. And then we take it outside of the house and people live in communities. We've talked a lot about some neighborhoods. Emily was talking about neighborhood spaces. We see sort of the creation of faux neighborhoods in different kinds of communities. I feel this tends generally to look a little Disney-esque, and they don't feel very real to me. I think, if we look at Tohokovic, everybody is probably familiar with that. the way they created the stores, the theater, the library, the cafe, the coffee shop, within this enclosed neighborhood, it feels more real, but it still is segregating people who are living with dementia from the rest of the world, as Bob talked about earlier. Is that a good thing or not a good thing? And for me, the answer is probably it's never all one or the other. Different people want different things. And until we get to a world where no one has any prejudices or isms, living with neurocognitive changes and being in a setting where other individuals are going to make you feel uncomfortable. They don't want to eat with you. They don't want to talk with you because they don't know how to talk with you. They don't want to be with you because they're afraid that, it's contagious and they might get it. Until we get to that place, I think there is room for both, but I think we've gone too far in the direction of segregation, and that we need to think more about integration. And this next image, I'm sorry, these aren't great pictures. I think some of the other images that Emily was showing are much better examples. This was a community I visited in Japan. This is an apartment building above, and the first floor is a memory care program. And it is small scale, so it feels quite residential inside. This is the front door, which is like an apartment building front door. It's not grandiose, and it's not the kind of door that you would see on a freestanding house the way we tend to build in the US. But one of the things that's interesting about this program is that door is never locked. The residents who live in this house on the first floor of this apartment, on the first floor of this building, are free to come and go into the neighborhood. When someone moves in, staff walk with the person around the neighborhood, introduce them to all of the shopkeepers, all of the sort of people who spend a lot of time there. And they all know that these are individuals who are out and in the neighborhood. And, if you leave the store, somebody in the store might say, are you heading back home, or are you going to do more shopping? And if the person says, I think I'm going back home, and they'll say, well, it's that building down there, if they need some help. Or if you want to keep shopping, you keep shopping. So the whole neighborhood has agreed to participate in creating normal lives for these individuals who are living with, some of them, very severe cognitive impairment. The people who are deeper into their dementia don't tend to want to leave the building on their own. They tend to stay in the building more, but the people who are still more cognitively functional do leave the building on a regular basis. So just really briefly, a little about some of the research that has taken place on environments for older adults. There's a significant amount of research, and most of it is focused on environments for people who are living with dementia. The earliest work was Powell Lawton at the Weiss Geriatric Pavilion. He was working in the 60s, and they built this building in 72. And if we look at the literature, we can see that there is significant growth in the numbers of articles that people can refer to. So these are literature reviews that have been done. And my slide, there we go. And so, in 2002, when Chris Day did a literature review, she could only identify 70 articles that were in English. By 2023, when Stephen Vertebur did it, there were 204, which is a nice increase, but it's still a drop in the bucket. And I think we need to keep pushing for more research. So again, there's been a shift in how we do the research, how we look at it. Early research looked at problem behaviors like incontinence and resident-to-resident aggression, or resident-to-staff aggression, and safety issues. We've talked about wandering. More recent research, it focuses not on the incontinence side of things, but how do we support continence? It's a totally different way of thinking about what it is we're trying to understand. More focus on meaningful engagement. What are the environmental correlates that support people being meaningfully engaged? Or biophilia. These are just a couple of examples. And so we don't talk about safety as much. We talk about security. Again, going back to what John was saying, home is a feeling. Security is a feeling. I feel secure whether or not I'm safe or not. And it's looking at it through the perspective of the psychology of the individual, and aging in place in community. So again, I go back to the PEEP and think these examples, these design principles, and the other ones that were like it. I had a slide that had them all on there and you couldn't read any of it, are really well situated to look at how are we all similar? Does anyone not want to have an environment that supports continuity of the self? I mean, imagine buying a house and then being told that you can't put any pictures up, and no, you can't have your furniture. We're going to put this interior designer supplied furniture there. Or, you know, we're going to intentionally design bathrooms that don't support your ability to maintain continence and take a shower safely. And so this shift to, it's all of us together. We're all in this together. And it's not, you know, if you design it, they will come. It's design it so that you would move in. And if you do that, you're likely to be designing to support other people, and they will see that as well. So what's next? I think we are moving into an era where there is deeper inclusion, where people who are living with dementia are intentionally brought in a meaningful way, not just a focus group where the architects sort of say, this is the design of the building, what do you think? And they take down the notes and then don't really listen to them, but really deep involvement in planning and design. I think we have a lot of work still to do on addressing the stigma of dementia. And part of that is eliminating or minimizing or rethinking our segregated living areas. Can we create these places where individuals, maybe they're still living together, but again, open the door. Don't keep them locked behind a door where it is so easy to other them, making them them. And finally, if you aren't familiar with the World Alzheimer's Report 2020, you should make yourself familiar with that, because the recommendations and the design examples that are in there are really remarkable. And it's one of the sort of the best resources that I've seen come out in the past couple of years. And I think that's all I've got. I will stop sharing.
Thank you very, very much, Maggie, for this very, very clear presentation. I think we've got a few questions. I'll just conclude with one thing, because what you're telling us is really important. It's really a shift from architecture that compensated disabilities to an architecture that is actually supporting abilities of people living with dementia, and altogether people, just any individual, as you just emphasized it. And I liked a lot this term refrigerator rights that you used earlier, because it tells a lot about what you can do. And it's true, when you're at home, you can access the refrigerator as much as you want, and when you feel at home at friend's house, you do that too. But as soon as you are not comfortable being somewhere, you will not permit yourself to take whatever you want in the fridge. Then that is, I think, a good way of seeing things and thinking things, and thinking about how free I am to live in this environment, and also how the setting, which we could relate to behavioral settings that we talk a lot in environmental psychology, but the setting has to lead us to go towards supporting abilities, feeling at home, feeling homely, and feeling free to do whatever we want. There's one hand up. John, you wanted to ask a question? You have to put your microphone on.
He's trying.
Yeah, try put your microphone on. We cannot hear you, John.
I was trying to send Maggie a clapping hands and saying what a well thought out and clear presentation it was, and I raised my hand by mistake. My technological.
Well, thank you, John.
Yeah, no, it's really clear and such a concise story is really something we need. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. We'll move on to the next session, which is by Gesine Makar and Hilde Verbeek. And both of them will be talking about the institutionalized care home and hospital design. And this will be presented by, it will be chaired by Sarah Wilcox. So I'm giving the chair over to her.
Thank you very much, Eve. And you're obviously welcome to enable the screen sharing for Gesine if you haven't already done that. And Gesine, if you would like to begin sharing your screen now, I'll just briefly introduce you while you do that. So we're really delighted to have you here. Thank you so much. You're going to be sharing your insights on hospital design for us, and you are Professor of Social and Healthcare Buildings and Design at the Faculty of Architecture at TUD Dresden University of Technology in Germany. So thank you very much. You are welcome to take the floor for the next 20 minutes, and we will take the questions at the very end of this session, the last 20 minutes after both Gesine and Hilde have presented.
Well, thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much. So you can hear me, I think, or I hope. Yes. Okay. Now about the slide sharing.
Yes, you're welcome to click on. Yeah, I can see your.
Do you see my slide in the presentation mode?
I think it's just loading. You may need to press that button again.
I see it.
Okay, just try pressing it one more time. I think your cursor over the.
It tells me that there's the presentation, everything. Okay, if I.
We see the PowerPoint presentation, but not the presentation view.
You see the, I don't know what that is, because I see the presentation view. Now okay. So you see like my PowerPoint slides, but like the whole PowerPoint.
Exactly. We see
yeah,
that.
so you have to try and share it again.
Yes, if you would, Gesine.
Okay, I will try that again. Otherwise, we will make do with what we have. Okay.
Oh, that's an interesting point. If you
I'm
have more than one.
again.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. That's great. Thank you.
Well, and now I start the presentation. Do you see the presentation mode now?
Yes, we do. Thank you.
Well, no.
No.
No,
we don't. No, we don't.
Well, to be on the safe side, you know what?
Yeah,
I will do it like this.
Go.
Yeah, stick on
Maybe
this.
that's
That's good.
the safer one. So you see
Thank you.
PowerPoint slide, and now
Yeah.
you see another slide. Is that
Yes,
correct?
that's right.
That's good.
Thank you.
Okay, I will not go into the presentation mode just to be on the safe side here.
Thank you, Gesine.
Okay, well, sometimes things are a bit difficult. Well, so sorry everyone for getting off to a bit of a later start. Anyways, yes, thank you for inviting me to present here today as well, an architect who has learned a lot about what we can do in design for people with dementia from all the people that were speaking before me. And now we are at the point, at the challenge is how do we translate that into practice, that architects can work on designing spaces for people with dementia. I'm presenting work I did with colleagues here at TU Dresden, especially thanks to Katrin Büter, who has been co-authoring the article for me in the book. And well, hospitals and care home design, it's quite a bit different difference between the two. We have heard a lot about the notions of home. Hospital is a home for a very, very short time, and it's very, very difficult to try anything to make it somehow recognizable as a home-like setting. I don't even know if that is the goal that we should aim for. But what I think, what I want to discuss with you today is the question, what exactly would be a dementia-friendly design that we bring into the designs that we do as architects. And what I want to start with is that I want to postulate that dementia-friendly design can be a driver for, well, innovative hospital design, for rethinking hospital design, paving the way for a more human-centered hospital design. So what we believe is that dementia-friendly design is very specific on the symptoms of dementia, but it's beneficial for everyone. And if it's done in the right way, you don't even see it. What you see is a good design. And how is it specific? Well, we heard about that. We heard about the reviews from Margaret speaking before me. So we have a big, or like a large, quite large body of research now, which is very, very helpful for when we are designing. We can look at all the review papers, and we realized that certain architectural or certain properties of architectural design definitely influence outcomes of people with dementia. So we know that spatial design, floor plan designs, ambience, colors, contrast, and so on have impacts on behavior, on cognition, on social abilities, and so on. Very specifically for people with dementia, but yes, for all of us, there are spaces that are conducive to well-being and that there are spaces that are not, and it's not that different for most people. Of course, there are cultural and other different aspects, but in general, us as human beings, we have very similar needs. So, and what we did in the past few years, and what is also being reported on in the book, is that we did research on design projects. Just to give you a very brief example on what we did. So here's a hospital ward, and we mapped, so what you see is a behavior mapping. We mapped the behavior of patients outside of their patients' rooms, only of people with dementia, and we were documenting where they walked, where they stopped, and what they did. And we realized that a small spatial intervention close to the nurse's station, which you see at the lower floor plan, you see how behavior has changed, that this would be necessary, that we would need a spatial anchor point on this ward so that people would come outside. And we felt, or we realized after having done the remodeling, that people spent so much more time outside of their patients' rooms that they did, or that they were engaged in many different kinds of activities. They started talking to each other. They started to sit down to observe what was happening. So we, with architecture, we were able to remodel the whole organizational setting within this hospital ward. So as architects, we have a very special responsibility. The physical environment and the way it is designed does matter. It does matter a lot. And there are a lot of design projects, and we know quite a few things, and I don't want to go into details here again. We know that supporting orientations is very important, wayfinding support, the use of colors, of contrasts, of guidance systems, and so on. And with all the knowledge that we had, we went into the hospital settings, and we realized even those rather scarcely investigated settings can be designed dementia friendly and still being human-centric, and still deliver a design where no one will feel this is a stigmatized or special ward. It will just be a good architecture that helps all patients who are in a state of being insecure, of not knowing what is going on with themselves, with their loved ones, and so on. So staying in a hospital brings us all in a, well, challenging situation. And a challenging situation for architects can also be designing spaces or situations where you have no guidance at all. Like here we had to work in an emergency department, and there is little to no evidence from research at all. And we have often the very grueling waiting time in the emergency departments of hospitals. And here we came up with the idea of designing a waiting pod that reduces the many stimuli that are around people, the sometimes disturbing noises, the visual overflow, the many different faces that are in front of you all of a sudden, and then they go away and they ask you questions. And we were trying to take those stimuli away and substitute them with selected, targeted ones. Have a drink of water. Have some distraction through the screen where you just see water and a lake and some sun and wind on the lake, some clouds that are moving. And well, it's in Berlin, what you see in the background, just see the skyline and think about what buildings you are seeing there. And what we have found then in use of this waiting pod, it's not only used for people with dementia, but also for people with autism or for anyone who has problems or trouble with withstanding the waiting time in the emergency department. So again, dementia-friendly design was helpful for everyone here. Well, and what are we talking about? So we have 10 approaches or 10 key approaches, what I would like every architect to give to say, well, this is evidence from research findings and from design practice. It actually works. And you can use it in any kind of setting, also in unknown settings where you realize that you need to do something for people with dementia, but also need to have a very human-centric design. So it's not animated now since I'm sharing the slides like this, but from the left always going down. So we talk about the floor plan layout, the floor space requirements. We talk about safety, orientation, and wayfinding systems. Lighting is important, colors and contrast, the atmosphere, concepts for activation and mobilization, and the concentration of stimuli, whether you want them and where not. And to look at them, at some of them, what they can be like or what architects need to think about. So a first thing what you do when you design a space or when you start with a task, it's usually you start with the floor plan layout because maybe nothing is there, or you remodel a building and then you can rethink the whole spatial connection and syntax of the spaces. And with the floor plan layout, you'd already decide about how well can people with dementia navigate the place. So we realized that straight layouts are good, but they can be institutional very quickly. So what we need and what we found is the most important issue in any floor plan design. We call it a spatial anchor point. You can come up with many other names for it. But what we found is that this anchor point in the floor plan plays a central role in the patient's or in the residents' ability to orient themselves, and it determines their level of activity, what they can actually do. So what is being offered? This is especially an issue in hospitals where often the passivity of patient is that what we expect. So, and a spatial anchor point is very recognizable. It has a lot of color. It has lighting. It is good recognizable. And well, in a hospital ward, it could be the common room, or it could also be like here, just a small space adjacent to the hallway. Most important is the central location, the distinctive design, and the good acoustic quality. It should not be too noisy. You need to be able to talk to each other and to understand people. And most important is the presence of other people, that you see staff, that you see people coming and going, that there is something to sit and watch, and you realize other people are there, they are around you, and something is going on. And yeah, so the next topic we have here is orientation. So the spatial anchor point, whether you have it or not already, determines people's orientation, not only finding this place, also finding the way back, like to their room, finding the hot toilet. So the organization of space already decides whether you will be able to find your way or not. And further orientation that is helpful is orientation to the space, understanding what kind of behavior should be happening in this room, like sitting together, talking, eating, or like sharing a meal, whatever is happening in the space. And orientation tells me where I am, and wayfinding tells me how do I get to the space. And the wayfinding systems, they help people, anyone, and especially people with dementia, to find their way within the building and to locate their room or locate or identify their bed in a shared room. And in a complex building like hospitals are, the guidance systems need different scales and various designs. So they need to work on each other, but need to be on different levels. And we need a holistic development of those systems. And what is really important is that we always remember that good architecture already naturally and intuitively guides the way. The signage that we put up can only partially compensate for a poor architecture. So the actual work of the architect starts with the first time, or with the first time they put the pen on the tracing paper and come up with a first idea. So how are we going to do that design? That already determines of how will people with dementia be able to get about in that building. And them being the lens on the good architecture, and then every one of us following suit. And well, there are many other aspects that we all know about, especially the people in this group. So we need good lighting, we need natural light, we need also artificial lighting with a high intensity, so that doing tasks can be done better. So it's older adults, better lighting is very, very important. We do know how important color contrasts are in understanding and remembering spaces. So there is a lot of evidence available on that. And for hospitals especially, we need to come up with concepts for activation and mobilization. I think in nursing homes, in care homes, in assisted living, we already do a pretty good job of making it home-like and having home-like activities, but that is very, very difficult in having that in acute care. And we always need to find the focus between the stimulation and deprivation on the other side. So what is the appropriate stimuli that we can offer? So, and with all these approaches in mind, so all design tasks that involve people with dementia or also other vulnerable groups can be addressed. And then we need to develop a holistic concept. And what we realized is that dementia-friendly architecture is always a result of research and design practice, bringing it together for each specific task. But it's always deeply rooted within the organizational, social, and the built environment of the current task and the cultural setting that we need, that we have around it. But we always need to put the person with their human needs into the center of all efforts. And I think the talks that came before my today gave us a very clear picture of the way of thinking that we need. So, and what we came up with and what is also introduced in the book are some concepts of how to design dementia-friendly spaces with using the knowledge that we have from different settings, bringing them to hospital concepts. So what ideas can we have that translate into those settings? So if we start with the emergency room, where we already did the little design of the waiting part, we still realized in our research and in the mappings and in the interviews we did there that the waiting period is the most challenging situation. So the best way is if we do not have people with dementia wait at all, if they are being early identified, that is a very good thing. But does not always work. Not everyone comes with their diagnosis, not everyone has it known, and also people who do not have dementia also have a bad can have issues with the waiting time. So what we realized, we need separate waiting areas to also shield patients from the ambient stimuli. Patients can also need to wait with their relatives. They need to do things to do and watch, enough space to move around, and especially the direct line of sight to a contact person here at a desk in that example, so that they feel seen and that someone is still there who takes care of them in case of need. And for architects to be helpful, we identified rooms within the emergency departments that need to adhere to the dementia-sensitive design standards that we identified, and which are mainly subjected to mainly functional considerations. And the guiding question is to consider which rooms patients are for, if for an extended time or even by themselves then, or with relatives. Another way to enter the hospital, if not through the emergency department, is via the main entrance hall. So like if you come in for a scheduled procedure. So this is the first point of contact with the hospital environment. And here the registration desk is clearly visible, and with a contact person again within the lobby area. But still, when you enter, you might be so overwhelmed, and we have a secluded or smaller cafe space suggested here that offers you a seat in a quiet location. So you have some familiar sensory stimuli on the one hand, and on the other hand, you can gradually familiarize yourself with the new spatial situation, and you have a view or an overview of the whole situation. And then with the memorable color design, you easily find a registration desk, so you're not right in the situation. You have some time to familiarize yourself and then start with exploring or with coming to the desk and saying why you are there and what you need to be done and so on. So that would be especially for people with an earlier stage of dementia, or for everyone who's just being overwhelmed with the situation. Now, other areas we were designing are the hospital wards, as I talked about, and here again, the provision of the central spatial anchor point is so absolutely crucial. So we need a contact person that is visible and present at this anchor point. We need comfortable seats for the patients, so they have a direct view, but also a view to the outside, have natural light, enough space for wheelchair users, and so on. So, and how do we achieve that? We already, again, need to start with the floor plan design as architects. So to the left, so you see two very similar floor plan designs of hospital wards, and what can architects do? So on the left, you see the spatial anchor point is at the bottom, so it's deep within the hospital ward. So patients would be or visitors would be entering the ward, and then they would be in a area which is not as easy to venture out. There would be the staff desk, there would be a sitting area, so we would be able to keep people on the ward and have them do activities there, and we have a very good overview of what is happening. So that would be one point, but where the exit would be further away from the spatial anchor point. The other one is just turned around. So as an architect, we move about spaces, and then we think about, well, but maybe having it right there at the entrance and the exit, so we see who is coming on the ward. On the other hand, when we are not there at the nursing station, if it's not occupied, then people may just leave, and not because they are so close to the exit door. So these things are just to be considered within the organizational environment, but the architecture determines the organization, and anything like signage, like locking doors, that is what we do afterwards, and when it's actually, well, too late. So architecture starts very, very early in the whole design process. Well, then again, the common room needs, or any common area needs to be adjacent to the to the staff area so that there's always a visual connection. And for the almost last slide, a quick glimpse into the patient's room. Family members need to feel welcome here. The design of the room must happen with them in their mind, and so that they also feel seen and feel welcome on the hospital ward. The key points of what we have learned from our project is that dementia-friendly design has a positive impact. It improves the well-being of individuals with dementia and of staff. The feasibility, we can say, yes, it's suitable for both new constructions and renovations. It is inclusive, it benefits diverse user groups, thus promoting inclusivity. And there often among architects is a great fear of the feasibility of aesthetic integration, but we hope that we can show that it enhances visual and architectural quality of care spaces. Well, thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Gesine. Thank you. That was a really fascinating talk, and I think those aspects of like the feasibility are so important to consider, particularly, you know, when our health and social care sectors are so squeezed for costs. So I'm really pleased to hear about that. And please do keep your questions coming in the chat, everyone, for those who would like to ask questions to our speakers. And if you want to elaborate on points in any greater depth, then please do so there. We will be having our VVox again at the end of this session. But without further ado, I will hand over to Hilde Verbeek now, who is chair of the Limburg Living Lab in Aging and Long-Term Care and professor of long-term care environments at the Department of Health Services Research, Care and Public Health Research Institute at Maastricht University in the Netherlands. Hilde, we are so pleased that you're able to join us today and to share your work with us on innovative care homes. It's going to be fascinating.
Yes, thank you very much for the invitation and the opportunity for me to present. Is this visible for everyone, and can everybody hear me? Yeah,
Yes,
excellent.
we can, yeah.
So I will share in the next about 10 to 15 minutes about our chapter, which is mainly about innovative living environments for older persons and how environment can contribute to later daily life. And I think it follows up nicely from previous speakers. And I will go into depth more one particular environment, that is green care farming, which is now becoming more and more implemented across the world. So first, to share a little bit of background. As we have heard from previous speakers, the key goals of environmental design are changing, and we see a lot more focus on living in nursing homes. So it's your home for life. It's about quality of life, feeling at home, your well-being, and the design should facilitate that. We've also learned from a lot of research that the influence on physical care environment, also from the previous speaker, really impacts your daily life, impacts functioning in older persons, especially those living with dementia. Think about, for example, for small groups or home-like atmosphere, and that matters. And in addition, we see also a movement of much more empowerment of older persons and their caregivers, families, including those living with dementia. They should have much more freedom, for example, more empowerment, more decisive power over daily life. And the goal of care environments is also in order to support that. So I think in this group, this is not something new, that we think the care environment influences daily life and well-being, and especially in older persons living with dementia. But I do think it's important to mention, because many of care routines, many of care practices, and also care design still believe that, well, it's people living with dementia, it's a brain disease and we cannot do anything about it. It doesn't really matter. And I think what's really important is to think about how the care environment can improve those daily lives, those functioning of older persons in those environments. And in our chapter, And I think that it really resonates nicely with the previous presentation. We define the care environment as an intervention, but we define it as a home consisting of 3 components. So you have all the residents living in the environment, and the physical environment and social care environment directly impacts that daily life. And physical environments is like the interior design, the building, architectural features, all the physical things you can grab or see in your direct environment. It also includes broader neighborhood spaces, for example, and how the physical space like gardens or outdoor areas are designed. Then you have the social environment consisting of your fellow residents or staff members or families who visit facilities, but also the broader community, like people in the neighborhood, schools, maybe local entrepreneurs or other persons whom you have in contact with. So social capital in the whole neighborhood or the area. And how they interact with the physical design can facilitate social interactions or facilitate the meeting of people, but also how we view the social community has an impact on the design of buildings. And what we say is, well, the top of the roof, which comes everything together or holds everything together, is the organization of our care and service delivery. So that entails organizational culture, like values staff have underlying their behavior, but also how they treat family, which competencies do staff have, and how is health and social care, for example, being delivered. And all these different influences impact on how the organization impacts on how the physical design is being built and how the social environment is being put forward to. And I think we've seen over the last decades that there have been some radical changes in innovative residential care, because we've seen many initiatives in more traditional or regular nursing homes, but these are really impacted by, for example, more traditional routines, organizational routines, and that impact on how physical and social environments are entailed. So we see worldwide a development of various initiatives that innovate that, for example, from dementia villages to more senior spaces. There are a lot of cooperative housing, shared housing arrangements where people with and without dementia, for example, are living. There are intergenerational housing projects where older persons with younger persons live together in communities. But also one of these is a green care farm environment. So we see a lot of diversity in these small scale, sometimes home-like initiatives. And some reviews have been put up in the last years, some of them looking more at impact or effects of these homes. In general, we see, and I very much agree with the previous speaker, that we need much more research because evidence is scarcely. But we did an overview of innovative living arrangements within long-term care. And we saw that these various initiatives across the world do have some common elements of that in promoting autonomy, especially relational autonomy. How can we use with others and empower older persons living with dementia? We see many design in small-scale home-like care environments, and that these can be in a collective space like groups, or it could be like an individual house. And then another important common element, what we see is that the organization of care, we see an integration of staff's tasks. And I think that's also an important one, saying, well, staff is not differentiated, like there's specific staff who do activities and specific staff for meals preparation and specific staff for personal care, for example. But you see that many of these concepts focus on more integration, that staff is responsible for activities, but also for personal care. They can prepare meals together, household chores or so. The integration of these tasks is a prominent feature across all these diverse concepts. In some, do think about the involvement of community. I think in the presentation of Maggie Colkins was a nice example of, do we really involve the outer community? And there's much more thought about, okay, we have a nursing home, but what is the impact of the social capital in the neighborhood or the area around it? And is it like true involvement of people, and how can we emphasize that? And some others talk about the more integration of nature and nature-based activities. And that is something which I would like to focus on in the rest of the presentation. And that is a specific form of these innovative facilities are green care farms. They have originated outside the healthcare sector as agricultural farms looking also for other activities to explore. And one of them was care. And what we see is that at green care farms, there is a combination of agricultural activities with care activities. And you see the development for various of client groups, so older persons, but also, for example, younger persons, children with autism, people with other disabilities. But what I would like to focus on is the potential for older persons and especially those living with dementia. In that areas, you see a lot of developments in the Netherlands and Norway, mostly as daycare activities and daycare facilities, so where people go during the day. But we see that is a phenomenon that is upcoming across the world. So not only European countries are now making these. We see also, for example, in South Korea, quite a big growth of these green care farming or social care farming. But also in the US and Canada, farms are starting up, and in Australia, for example. So it's a phenomenon which is becoming more widespread. And what's interesting also is we see the potential for residential care. For example, in the Netherlands, it's now an upcoming phenomena where residents are not only there for daycare activities, but as a true alternative to regular nursing homes. And that doesn't mean that it really has to be a farm in operation. You also see that residential care is more the prominent thing, and that they are looking for it small-scale home-like care, but with a really nature-based component in it, like where you have a lot of opportunity for weeding, soiling, taking care of animals, for example, that it's really integrated in daily life. And that's something which is also being picked up by other countries, for example. So we did some studies and we present some of the results also in the chapter, but what do we see as an impact for the green care farms? And some of the first result is, and I think these are very promising, that if you look at similar residents, so residents living with dementia who are quite advanced in their dementia with severe cognitive and abilities and severe ADL functioning, if you compare these two groups, one of the groups living at green care farms and the other group living in traditional nursing homes, we see significantly more activity and less passivity at green care farms. We see more social interactions between residents with staff and family members, and we see that residents living at green care farms are significantly more often outside. Why is this latter important? Some studies are appearing now that the majority of residents never go out, never come outside, so they don't feel the sun on their skin or the rain or don't smell things like that. And we see that in these studies, for example, when residents were outside, it was also related to having a positive mood. We don't know cause and effects, obviously, but I think it's an important point of view to think, okay, how can we involve more of the residents actually being outside? We also looked at, for example, more quality of care indicators, like is there differences in residents to staff ratios? What about protocols? There is also always an issue like what about health and safety risks and protocols? And some of the outcome indicators like pressure sores or falls, etc. And we saw in our study that these were comparable quality of care indicators. I should notice that the green care farms we do a lot of studies with almost all work together with a larger care organization which has also more traditional homes. So they often exchange protocols, and that these green care farms are more purpose-built or specifically designed facilities or settings. Then another important question is obviously why. If we see, so this was more based on our studies. In the chapter, we present a little bit also more on more general evidence, also, for example, looking at daycare activities, which are quite similar in essence, seeing, well, we have more activities at these green care farms, more meaningful engagement. Why is that? So I think it's important that we do much more studies in the environmental working mechanism. And is it just because you have a more traditional home and we put some pets in it? I don't think that that's the case how it works. We've also seen that in other studies. There is more to it. And we present some of the, I would like to share some of the first insights from these working mechanisms. And I think these resemble also the previous presentations. That again, if you have the house of an organizational physical social environment, we see that these green care farm environments especially have 6 working mechanisms. And the first 2 are encouraging meaningful activities and stimulating the senses. So it's really about how can we provide purpose in the environment. It could be either through nature or animals, but also with household chores. And how can we stimulate the seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting of residents? So all senses should be involved in that, and it should have some purpose, or residents could have purpose to it. However, we also see 2 other things like creating a community. It's really important that we see in these green care farm, there's no true othering, like staff, family, and residents all together are one community. And there we share responsible freedom and autonomy for each other. It's not as staff is only responsible, but it's a shared responsibility, and we create a community feeling in that. And I think we should learn more about how and what that really is. But that's an important aspect. And some final things are more related to the organizational environment, is that we should integrate a vision that you have on care, on the meaningful engagement, the purpose, the safety, etc. But it should be integrated in all actions we do. It's not something that you do on a particular time or moment. For example, we organize activities in outdoor from 2 to 3 p.m. on Wednesday, and on Monday we have this. It should be integrated in all actions. And one example is putting out the trash. Nobody likes putting out the trash, for example, but in one of the environments, this was made a daily routine with residents being involved. So every day after dinner, it was a shared responsibility. We take out the trash, and we put the trash bin on purpose quite far away. So we have to take a walk. We encourage physical activity. And during that walk, we see the flowers in the field, and we see other fellow residents, which we could have a chat with. One resident could help another resident who is in a wheelchair, for example. So there's also this reciprocity which you can encourage. And it's a process that never finishes. So you need continuously transformation to keep that vision alive. Also in these green care farm environments, over time, more institutional routines can appear again. So there needs to be, from leadership, a critical reflection with staff, with family, with residents, etc. And for example, COVID-19 was really putting this up again, because during that period, everything was really focused on health and safety and regulations again, and was really harming some of the visions. And afterwards, there was really reflections again needed. Okay, do we need, how do we see these things again? So I would like to finish with some future directions. I think it's important for the design and to think about these mechanisms. In my opinion, I don't think these mechanisms are only for green care farms. I think they can be implemented across a diversity of settings, and we should really try to focus on this diversity of housing with care across different groups, across different ages, different contexts. Not everybody wants to live on a farm, and we shouldn't do that, but these underlying mechanisms which we were talking about, that could be given place in every type of environment. How can we use technology and also maybe artificial intelligence in order to help staff, help family, help residents of coming out with these principles? And what is the use of technology in that, and how do we see? We see sometimes also that people think there's a huge trust in technology, like for example, tracking devices, but is that really helping or not? Or is it that we have too much faith in it and that we don't think about how do we create communities, etc. And I think there's really what you see changing roles in caregiving between formal, informal care, staff, residents, whose house is it? Is it a working environment or is it a home? If it is a home, that really means something for staff and roles, and how do we redefine or how do we see these changing goals also in setting that up, that vital community or that community feeling. So this was in short a highlight of the chapter, and I'm looking forward to take questions, and I'll stop sharing now.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much, Hilda. I think that point that you made at the end about technology is potentially creating new problems that need to be solved rather than helping reach the goals is really key.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we see some of these green care farms working with technology, but also normal homes putting in elements of green care farming and then saying, oh yeah, we can have the residents let their freedom because we give everybody a pulse tag, a tracker device. And I think, well, I don't think that's the way forward because why should you do that? And shouldn't we also think, what do individual residents need in order to get that freedom, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. And that really connects to what Maggie was talking about before when she mentioned the issues of sort of segregation versus inclusivity as well.
Exactly.
I think that's fascinating.
Exactly.
Faye Rodriguez Marquez has an interesting question that follows up from your point about the comparability of quality of care indicators. And they wonder, with the residents in green care farms, did you see that they were perhaps less medicated in comparison to those who were traditional residential care?
Yeah, that's a very good question. First, results do show that in these small home-like care facilities, there is less psychotropic drug use, for example. And we're now taking that also in more depth in a larger study of including more residents to see whether that still is the case or not. And so first indications do show it, but I'm a little bit hesitant to say, oh yes, that's the truth, because we do need more studies, I think, about that.
Absolutely. Thank you. We've got even more questions coming, but we also, I know we have the VVox to get ready. So perhaps if you begin sharing that screen so people can start drawing that up with the QR code and we can take some more of these questions.
I will do that, but I just wanted to ask about sleep because of circadian rhythm improvement with the exposure to the outdoors and less sundowning, perhaps. Have you seen that? Is there improved sleep?
Well, thank you very much for that question. We're currently investigating that using sleep questionnaires, and we've got data now on over 150 residents living in green care farms, and we're now doing the control group because that is one of our hypotheses. We hear that anecdotally, from staff do report that anecdotally, but we're now getting to seek the evidence. So I can't say that yet. I hope in 1 year.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Now we will return to a question for Gesine from Margaret. And this is, she says that while I'm not generally in favour of more regulations, Gesine, do you think that we can craft some rule that just says a hospital plan needs to document how they consider the needs of people with neurocognitive changes in the design process?
Yes, that's a good question, and that's very much an everyday life issue when planning or when designing, that you already do have enough regulation and a lot of regulation. And all countries, I would say, definitely us in Germany, but I also know that about the United States and other European countries, have standards on barrier-free design, and that's where it should be. So we would need those standards just to expand the topics of sensory and cognitive impairments, even though I must say that our German standards on accessibility, they already cover that, but enforced is only the part of the wheelchair accessibility, which makes the rest of the design at the discretion of the specific architect or the people who commission the work and so on. So that's the rules are actually there, or if they do not cover it yet, they could be just a little bit expanded. So, and we are working on this, but the steps are incremental. So we had some success, but it's a very stepwise process, which, yeah, I would wish we could get behind, but the rules are there. We just need to, yeah, expand them a bit.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for that reply. And Bryony Waters Harvey asks you if there are any results on the impact of changing the emergency units for people with dementia.
I don't see the question. What does it mean with changing? Oh, the impact. Oh, yeah. Oh, I get it. Yes. Yes. We had some just only like well, what staff was telling us after we had made the changes, and they said, well, one thing is that they were very happy of having this space where people with dementia and their, well, relatives, caregivers, whoever is coming with them can wait with them, that this would be an important thing, so that people who would have, or who would, well, have big issues with the waiting time. It's not always clear, are they all people with dementia, or are there also other underlying causes? But having additional waiting space with reduced stimuli, they said, would be very, very important. And they also said it was very helpful, our design for intoxicated patients. Well, but whatever it is, whatever it is, and that brings human-centered design forward is very helpful. And if it's good for people with dementia too, or specifically, even the better. So the broader it can be used, the more we can think about like it's being part of general barrier-free or inclusive design. So yes, positive feedback, but not too specific. We did not do a research study on like an evaluation.
Absolutely. Okay, how are we doing with our VFox, everyone? Are we managing to use our 20 characters wisely? Make a lovely word cloud, and then if we want more, oh, look at this, fantastic. I don't need for better research seems to be reaching out here. Risk versus autonomy. That's a very fascinating balance that people are trying to keep in mind. We've got another couple of questions coming in, and we can all see that word cloud kind of evolving, which is great. Let me just make sense of these questions. Magdalena Blauzusiak says, or is this about sufficient time or finances upfront to enable clients to produce robust research-informed briefs?
Well, we do have, yes, I mean, better briefs, always very helpful, but we do have a lot of information of how many people are coming to the hospital, how many people are with dementia are among them, how many people with certain diagnoses of certain ages. We know that we should be designing with the well, let's say the most vulnerable patient in mind. So no, putting it only on the side of the clients, I don't think that this is really the way to move forward. But clients need to be aware, so they need to say that's what we need. So they need to be aware of the situation, not neglect it. But whether it needs to be in the design brief, I think it should be standard and should not be necessary to mention, like in hospital designs and care home designs, the needs of people with dementia. That should be understood. I mean, just if we just look at the at our demographic situation, I think it's very obvious. But still, yes, clients should ask for it. So they would not need to develop the design brief in more detail, but it should be part of it, making it clear, writing it down, saying that's what we want, even though this is something architects should definitely deliver. But yes, both sides. So we should we need push and pull factors.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And a final question for Hilda from John. Have you written anything about any paradigm shifts implicit in the principles you present?
No, not yet. We're working on some of the things for risk versus autonomy and to get that more paradigm shifts behind it. But I would love to get in contact and discuss that more. So thank you. Yeah.
Wonderful. I'm going to pick up on something that I think is relevant, particularly in my own context here, and something that we deal with a lot, which is sort of the staff resistance side of things, or that interaction with staff here. How many realities? That's an interesting consideration there. Intergenerational robots in care. Oh, another favourite topic of mine. Lovely.
Well, it's quite interesting. We have one story of a lady living at the Green Care farm who has a robot dog. So she has all the others, but also her robot dog, and she's really attached to that. But her son is one of the professors on warm technology, so I think that might have something to do with it.
That could indeed. Do you happen to know if she knows it's a robot dog?
I don't know the name or which specific one. I can ask. I will. Thanks.
Oh no, sorry. I meant if she knows she has a robot dog as opposed to a dog.
Yes, she knows. Yes,
Yeah.
she knows. Yes, and she's very aware and of that fact that it's not a real one. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's quite fun. We've got we've got a couple more minutes, and we have a little question come in here. Are you working with other professionals for these designs? I'm an occupational therapist with extensive education in dementia, and I would love to work with architects and interior designers for incorporating these types of settings for institutions as well as for residential. How do you suggest that occupational therapists approach your profession?
Okay, so as it's towards architects, so I think that's for me the question. Well, we always need a multi-professional team. As architects, we can only get so far, and we need as in the one slide, we need the organizational environment, we need the built environment, we need the social environment, we need all the professions that are there. So I think it's always a question of the team. So if you are, as the occupational therapist, I don't know if you are working with a clinic or with some kind of healthcare provider. So they always have certain projects going on, redesigning, remodeling, and sometimes just what seems very simple, just renovations. And even trying to get into the team that works on that task, or who is the ones who listen to the architects when they bring in their designs and give recommendations. I think being part of that team would be the best way of getting started in the field, if I do understand that question correctly.
Thank you. I'm also an occupational therapist, and I really, I really think it's so vital to work together. This kind of, it's very multidisciplinary. This field that we're in when we're thinking about the environment and that interaction with what people do and what's meaningful to them, how we build that into the space. But I'll keep this schedule moving on time, and thank you both so very much for bringing even more dimensions to this idea of homelikeness. And I hand back over to Eve and Kevin.
Thank you very much, Eve, Hilda, sorry, Hilda and Gesine. And thank you very much, Sarah, for chairing this session brilliantly.
So I'll introduce Bill Halsall. Bill, are you there? If Bill's there, I hope he is. Bill Halsall, there you are. Good. I'll quickly introduce you.
I'm visible and everything.
Yeah, there you are.
Thanks very
Fantastic. Much. Thank you. I'll just quickly introduce you. So I was really fortunate in God, when was it, Bill? Was it a long time ago? 2015, I think, 10 years ago. We met we were tendered by Building Research Establishment to develop an inclusive dementia home, later called the Chris and Sally House. And Loughborough University had a multidisciplinary team developing persona to guide that design, which involved many stakeholders. It involved, that was Professor Sue Hignett, it involved Malcolm Cook, who was is still a professor of civil and building engineering, who focused on thermoregulation in this house, and myself to look at the promotion of meaningful activities focusing on exercise and nutrition within the house to keep people independent. But we wouldn't have gotten anywhere if Bill hadn't stepped in from HLP Liverpool, and he runs a couple of architectural practices. He is both a dementia specialist, but he also has developed many inclusive communities around Liverpool and elsewhere, and he's also a landscape designer, and he is the lead author of the second book that we're launching today, which is about the Chris and Sally house. And Bill will now hopefully share some of his insights with us on that particular development. So over to you, Bill.
Great, thanks. Thanks very much for the introduction, Eve, and thanks very much for the invitation to take part in the conference. Obviously in exalted company here, but it's particularly nice to see you and Mary, old friends. I realise we're a bit tight on time, but I'll get straight onto the presentation and make it work.
So if you can share it on the top with the top button next to the leave.
Yeah.
And you can send it to me and I'll share it for you.
Is it over there?
I don't think that's the one.
Just getting some tech support.
Yes, super. You got it.
You got it.
It's there.
Okay.
Yeah, it's there. Fantastic. Thank you.
Great. So it's I just start with some background, and we talk about the Chris and Sally's house, but then I think also want to talk about how we move things forward. What are the next steps in terms of getting this things to happen? So my background, as you say, is I'm an architect. I'm a landscape architect. I've got about 50 years experience in housing and regenerating neighborhoods. And my work is driven by participation and engagement with user groups or future residents or members of housing organizations. So this first photograph shows, this is about 10 years old. It shows our engagement that we originally carried out in conjunction with John Moores University, Dr. Rob MacDonald. And we were working with a group called the Dementia Action Alliance as part of a bigger pan-European project. And we were asked to just get involved. And then obviously we used immediately, we went into our participation mode and started doing hands-on modeling and things like that. And that really got a good response, and we moved the discussion forward, and people wanted us to record our findings and their experience in the form of a book. So Rob and I, with some help from my colleagues in HLP, we wrote a book called Design for Dementia, a guide. So it's design guide. Now, to cut a long story short, that led us to be involved in Chris and Sally's house with Eve and her friends at Loughborough. And we can move that on. That's it. So this describes another exercise that we did And what the motivation behind this was that obviously we're working with a group there in Dementia Action Alliance who are in the early stage of dementia. But people in the later stage of dementia obviously have a different challenge in terms of communication, because we don't like being challenged, being asked questions. So we thought, well, how do you break down barriers and communicate with people? And we found this, it's quite an old idea really, is the sand play, invented by called Gustav Jung. And basically it's a game. You've got a tray full of sand, and we have objects which stimulate all the senses, including some nice roses there and things like that. And we have objects which have association, bars of soap and Uncle Joe's mint balls and things like that would have an association for older people. And we have this is a trial run of these photographs, but we have used this live, as it were, with a group down in the Midlands of people who were quite well advanced with the dementia. And the feedback was really good, actually. The staff at the care home said it was the most animated they've ever seen people. So obviously it's an idea, it needs further development, but it does seem to work. So onto Chris and Sally's house.